Let's explore what the CEO and investment strategist Raoul Pal thinks about where we are in the current market cycle.
My bet is we'd probably get negative rates back in the end of 2023. Sorry, not negative rates, negative inflation, 2023, 2024. I think the roadmap that we use for this is the 1940s and 50s and not the 1970s that everybody thinks. So the 1970s was the only example in history where inflation came up, came back down, didn't go all the way back down, then shot up again. I think that was driven by demographics and the Federal Reserve are fighting an old ghost. And it's not the ghost that they should be fighting. I think the more decent parallel is the 1940s to the 1950s, when everyone came out of World War II, the factories had to retool, so there was supply shocks, and then demand shock of everybody coming into the workforce again. That drove up prices 20%. It was a bigger event than COVID. And then prices collapsed, went negative, -2, -3% year on year, then rebounded 2 years later. We got a secondary bout of inflation just from the mathematical numbers. The Fed that time around imposed yield curve control because they didn't want to raise rates and destroy the economy. I think we're going to see similar this time. Anyway, too early to tell, doesn't really matter for this point. This point is we're at the low point in the cycle. I think inflation is lower. I think the crypto markets are going to be explosively better this time around. We're also seeing a lot of interesting things like the RSIs, weekly RSIs in Ethereum and Bitcoin are right down at levels that have always seen reversals. We're seeing it with on-chain activity. We're seeing it with minor capitulation. We're also seeing it with volatility. The 30-day realized volatility of both ETH and Bitcoin is at levels that always precedes the large rallies and the big reversals. So I've pretty much got everything in place. Is it possible to get some other down leg? I doubt it, unless something can drive bond yields high. And I just don't see that outside of a temporary blip because one of the inflation numbers or one of the employment numbers is skewed somewhat. So I don't see that happening. So I think we are moving higher. I think ETH based in June, and I've said that for several months now, in fact, since June when I started adding to my positions. The bottom of the cycle is always it's a scam, it's a Ponzi, all the media hates it, everybody throws shit at each other online, everybody's looking for blame, looking for scapegoats. We are exactly in that point now. It is ugly out there. And that ugliness out there is a real measure of where we are in the cycle. So we're at the despair and anger phase. And then we have the acceptance phase, which is the boredom phase, which I think we've rolled into, where prices don't do anything for a while and everyone starts getting fed up and moves on elsewhere. You can see artificial intelligence is getting people's attention just when they should be looking at crypto as well. Don't forget, artificial intelligence is not really investable for most of us because it's all VC, while crypto is real-time VC that we can trade, which is part of the magic of it. So we're at the blow-up phase, the FTX scandal. Now, I've seen this. I've seen it with Mt. Gox. I've seen it with Bitfinex. I've seen it every single bloody cycle. And this time around, everyone's like, oh my God, it's the end of the world. Yeah, it's every time the end of the world. And guess what? It's not. It's never the end of the world. People say, well, nobody's ever going to come back into this market. Well, I've been around. I've been around the block a long time. I've been 30 odd years in financial markets. And I've seen this with hedge funds. Long-term capital management, the biggest blow-up of a hedge fund in history, the Fed had to bail out the whole system. What everybody shouted at them, they're a Ponzi, they're a scam, they're over-leveraged. Hedge funds are uninvestable. Net outcome, the net assets of hedge funds went up 5x over the next 7 years. Why? Regulation. Regulation appears to have cleaned up the space, and then people feel much safer to come in because the institutions are waiting.